Hours away now from the start of session, we begin with the most powerful woman in the Florida legislature. Senate President Kathleen Passidomo presides over half the GOP supermajority, already voting through plans that alter the landscape of education, gun culture, housing, public safety, all while the governor seems to head toward the presidential campaign trail. We talk about it all one-on-one with Madam President. I mean, there's so much work that has already been done going through committees, and I want to start out with, I know, something that is your priority, and I will tell you the priority of every single local and state official that we talk to, and that is affordable housing in the state. And you've done so much work on this already. There's a unanimous vote in every committee your affordable housing bill has gone through so far. That's pretty big in Tallahassee at the moment. Frame for us, it looks like the headline that could be on here is incentives for private development. Does that sound valid?
No, I wouldn't say. The bill is a robust bill. It's 106 pages. That's a small piece of it. I would say the headline for this bill is what we're calling it, which is Live Local. And what that means is we have to find a way that we can provide, and when I use the word we, I mean it's a collaboration of local governments, the state, housing, Florida housing, and developers, and just communities as a whole. We need to provide the access to safe, affordable housing for the people who work in our communities. And how we do that, we have a myriad of provisions in the bill that address that. One of the provisions, yes, is incentives to developers to provide housing at lower than a market rate. And the incentives include things like, if they're building now, we'll give them sales tax breaks on the materials they use to build the housing. Ad valorem tax breaks for those units that are at the lower rate, and obviously they would be paying market rate taxes on market rate units. There are a number of those, but there also are a lot of incentives and encouragement to local governments to participate. For example, we are asking local governments to speed up permits and to allow multifamily residential in commercial areas. Miami's the perfect example. You have many of your transportation corridors, not just US 1, have lots of strip centers on them that are, in many ways, some of them are vacant, underutilized, located next to banks and office buildings and hospitals and the like. And wouldn't it be great if we could renovate some of those properties to build multifamily residential so that the people who work in the banks, who work in the office buildings, that work in the hospitals, could walk to work because they could live local. So the bill has all kinds of provisions there.
So I want to, that's a very interesting thing to delve into for the moment, because it's almost, if anyone who's ever lived in a big city where there's a very robust mass transit network, walking to work or being very close to where you work is kind of an urban thing. But there's, in the bill, there's a component about preempting local zoning rules. And I want to talk a little bit about that, because that means preempting local decisions on height or density, which sounds like it might be very valuable to do what you are talking about doing. But the flip side of that coin, I'm going to guess, are local governments on behalf of residents really raising red flags about what that might mean.
First, we are not preempting zoning at all. That's not what the bill does. We encourage local governments to do things like density bonuses and the like, but we're not preempting local zoning ordinances. We are asking them to fast track changes that they make and things like that. So I think that's a misunderstanding of what the bill does. I think you did allude to something that is something that we as a state need to do, whether through local governments, through the business community, is we have to change the narrative and the rhetoric that when you use the term workforce housing, you are not talking about crime-ridden projects that have, green buildings with graffiti, the things you think about from 1980. What we're talking about are homes for the people who we work with every day. First responders, nurses, teachers, secretaries, the people who cut our hair, the people who fix our cars, the people who work with us and for us. Those are the people that we are targeting. We have created a provision in the bill called the missing middle. And those are people that make too much money to qualify for some of those affordable housing projects that we have today. And they don't have enough money to live. In Miami, the median home price is $600,000 for a not so nice house, a tear down. Well, how could a family that makes it, even like our missing middle number is like $96,000 a year. That sounds like a lot, but you can't afford a $600,000 house for that. So what we want to do is to incentivize developers to build projects to target those people.
And so you bring up something we experience in Miami-Dade and Broward, increasingly in Southwest Florida, where you're from, your development there. There is income inequality has settled in so that you have subsidized housing in 3 or 4 or 5 blocks away from gazillion-dollar condos on the beach. So the other component to those home ownerships, it would be the cost of property insurance, the cost of windstorm insurance, taxes and the like. Is there a component that would help people who are going to be now able to afford down the pike these homes in these developments? Is that going to be cost prohibitive for them as well?
Well, the insurance issue is a real issue in our state. We passed a robust insurance bill in December that we hope will go a long way to rein in some of the practices of some of the trial bar, a very small number of the trial bar, by the way, that have a practice of suing insurance company for fees and the assignment of benefits issue and one attorney. There's a lot of provisions in that bill. We are hopeful that with time, and hopefully not a long time, as I'm going to keep my finger on that pulse there, we'll make inroads and bring down the cost of insurance. We have to do that. There's no magic bullet to get this done. There are so many issues. The framework in this bill is the actual housing itself. We look at the insurance from a different aspect. There are a lot of other things to look at as well.
School choice for all, no more concealed weapons permits, and assisting the governor's run. We pick up there when we come right back. Gentleman across the rotunda from you, House Speaker Paul Renner, is HB 1. We've discussed it on this show a lot. The bill, pretty massive, that essentially would make school vouchers available to all, universal vouchers. We actually discussed it this week, last week on this program. $4 billion is the estimated cost, but according to the state, the costs are indeterminate. And I know the Senate has filed an identical bill. I just wanted to get your take on what would be really a sea change for public education in Florida when this is passed?
Well, first of all, I don't know where the $4 billion came from. I think that's something that was floating around, and we've gotten some preliminary numbers, and they're still working on it, and it's nowhere near $4 billion. That being said, the concept of the bill, the policy of the bill, is a good policy, and that is, and the speaker feels very strongly about this, as I do, that parents should be able to determine where their students go to school. And so opening up this whole voucher system, very simply, the money follows the student. Now, here's the one thing that I'm adding to this whole mix, in that throughout the years that I've served in the legislature, I have been hearing from our school districts that the legislature continues to pile on provision after provision in law of requirements. And they're right. Since I've been there, since 2010, every year we pass 3 or 4 bills which have requirements on the public school system to do things, whether it's hardening issues, structural issues, curriculum issues, all kinds of things. And when you look at it, and it's added up over time, what I hear from superintendents and teachers are, we don't have time to teach reading, writing, and arithmetic because we're so busy teaching all the stuff you make us teach. So I've added a component to the bill. And so here's what their argument is, and it's a good argument. Why are you imposing all these requirements on us and you're not imposing them on the charter schools or the private schools? So we have a choice. Do we impose all the requirements that we put on the public system, on the private system, or the public charter schools? Or maybe better, why don't we reduce those regulations and those requirements? So the bill we started with a number of provisions on things that we are saying you no longer have to do. And we are going to ask the Department of Education to spend some time over the summer with school superintendents, school board members, teachers, parents, stakeholders, to go through the code. And it's about this thick, it's huge, of requirements on them to determine what can be deleted. And I think that'll level the playing field between the private schools, the public charter schools, and the public school system. And it should go a long way to make a better relationship.
Yeah, there's a lot in this bill that really attempts to level the playing field. I guess the essential question is, you had mentioned that the money follows the student. I think Speaker Renner called it like a health savings account. You take your money, you go where you want. And I guess the essential question is the $8,000, a little less than $8,000 per student that Florida allocates. Are you concerned that that will almost defund public schools, if the parents choose that in a neighborhood?
Well, why would it? If you have students that are not in the public school and they're in another school, then you don't have to provide the services to them that you previously did. I think it all should work its way out. I think the speaker is also looking at making sure that the public school system is made whole, and the bill has some really good goals, and I think we're going to get across the finish line. It may not look the same as today, but if you keep your eye on the mission, which is parents having the ability to choose the educational opportunities they want for their students.
Getting it across the finish line, is there any doubt anything's going to fail to get across the finish line? There's a supermajority in both houses.
I'm glad you bring that up. Here's the thing. Yeah, we have a supermajority in the Senate, but we are a Senate family. And every single member of the Senate is important to me as president. I will not, and I have not, lorded it over the Democratic senators, because they are part of the Senate. Excuse me. Every one of us was elected by about 600,000 people, or we represent, 600,000 people. And whether we have a supermajority or not, we treat each other with dignity, respect, and at the end of the day, we go home to our constituents and said, this is what I've done for you.
I will tell you, we have only met electronically today, but everyone I have ever met, including friends of mine in the Senate on both sides, say you're good people. They echo all of that. So.
Well, I'm just old.
No. Okay, wait, we got more work to do here. Hold on. I want to talk about the permitless carry bill. That actually morphed into public safety as the new title in the Senate, and there were some components of school security added to it. Let me tell you the number one criticism I hear from people, including gun safety instructors who are members of the NRA, who say they're very concerned about the absence of a training and competency aspect to this.
Okay, so, that's a really good point. And I raised that with, some of the sheriffs I know. And Sheriff Galtieri told me that what is actual training that they do now. Now, some people who want to learn how to actually use a weapon will go to a class and they'll do all the right things, and they'll go to a shooting range and they'll do, read the course and the book. You can get a permit by taking an online class, and you know how those things are. And then for the shooting part of it, you go to some place where they have a barrel and you shoot one bullet into the barrel. That's not training for me.
No, but wouldn't that be a great argument for adding to the bill some components of better training requirements?
I think it always goes the other way. So for me, the important part of that bill is the public safety provisions. That was something that I have been talking about for a long time, and that's my focus. I think with regard to permitless carry, I absolutely believe that when that the government, if you're looking a strict interpretation of the Second Amendment, that you don't need permission from the government to carry your weapon. But the government can put reasonable restrictions, but you don't have to get their permission. So that's where we started. But then I started to look at the whole bill in itself, and I had been thinking about the school safety issue for a long time. And I said, well, I'm not going to put it in the bill because we have to protect our kids, and those provisions, I think, are absolutely necessary, absolutely the right thing. And then the last thing that kind of came up from Sheriff Wood from Ocala, Marion County, was the dog program that I absolutely love. And I stand by those provisions. I think they are fabulous, and I hope that everybody supports the bill because of those.
You know, it's universal. Every time we run a dog story, everyone tunes in, ratings go sky high.
Well, did you know what it does? It's really very interesting. These dogs are trained to detect weapons and ammunition.
They're actually being used. That program, I think, is in effect in a Broward high school. I want to say yes. Deerfield Beach High School.
Yeah, I have heard that.
Yeah.
So the sheriff brought one of them up to Tallahassee, and he came in, and it was a girl, and I was petting her, and we were just having a grand old time. And then the sergeant came in, and of course he carries a weapon. Concealed, of course. The dog stood at attention, and I'm like, oh. Because I mean, and the thing about that I like about it is I can imagine the dogs become part of the school, and the whole program would be the kids could name the dog. That could be, the relationship between law enforcement and the students can be cemented through the relationship with the animal, and I'm really about that.
That's really nice. In the short time we have left with you, there's a lot to talk about. I just want to, I know you have things to do today, I'm sure. So I just want to, I feel pretty comfortable now that the governor's on his book tour. We were with him this week. He visited Miami. I feel kind of comfortable saying we expect him to file to run for president. And so with that said, will you be supporting changing the law, the resign to run law, to allow that to happen without the governor resigning as governor?
So two things about that. There is some discussion about whether or not it needs to be done. The member who sponsored the original bill way back when believes that the intent was not to require it. But in an abundance of caution, I would have no problem doing that. And honestly, I don't care who the governor of the state of Florida is, whether it be a Democrat or Republican. The governor of our state, if the governor of our state decides to run for president, that is a huge deal. It would mean a lot for our state, no matter who it is. So I would support that. Secondly, we have a good system. This is not like a member of the legislature running for Congress or for the U.S. Senate, because if they resign, there's nobody there to take their place, and we have to do a special election. In our case, if the governor runs for president, we have a lieutenant governor from your neck of the woods who immediately can step in and is eminently qualified, very involved, can take over right away. So you don't have to do a special election and all that entails. So I don't see any downside with making sure that whoever our governor is wants to run for president, they don't have to resign, because they are a governor and they should be able to stay there if they decide not to, or they don't make it through the primary.